All right, we're going to kick off with our first panel discussion of the day on infrastructure, specifically the future of transportation infrastructure. So I'd like to call all of the panelists and the moderator to come up, please. And I'd like to introduce the moderator. Laura Chace is President and CEO of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America, ITS America. She previously served as its Chief Operating Officer. Laura's passionate about the need to include more female and diverse voices in transportation, one of the founding members of Mobility XX initiative, which, by the way, I personally am delighted to see, and I'm personally delighted to see so many more women achieving leadership roles in this field. Laura previously worked at US Telecom, the American Trucking Association, served in roles at the Department of Justice and the White House. So, Laura, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hold on a second. Okay, can you hear me? Still working? Okay, perfect. Well, good morning and welcome. And I'm going to be brief because I know we have a very short time for our panel. I want to thank John and all of the and Jinwon, all the folks here for inviting us and having this discussion today. I think it's incredibly timely, particularly on the future of infrastructure. So I'm just going to preface with a brief comment or two and then introduce the panel. So right now, as many of you in this room know, our transportation system is in the midst of a transformation right now. It's moving from one of concrete roads, or paved roads, concrete bridges, to one of sensors, data, algorithms, computing, and communication networks that all form a digital infrastructure layer. And these advances we've seen in technology, in automation, and connectivity, in sustainability and resiliency technologies, and more, allow us to use this advanced technology to deliver better outcomes for people. It's allowing us to have real-time data that can be shared, stored, analyzed, and used to deliver on safety outcomes, to mitigate impacts of extreme weather events, to be able to distribute services more equitably to people. And I really appreciate John's focus on people because that's also where we focus as an association. Technology plays a starring role, but its role is in support of better, livable communities for people and transportation that connects everybody to all of the opportunities that you need to be both socially and economically mobile and successful. So with that, I want to focus on this new digital infrastructure layer that is being built out, particularly with a lot of the funding available now in the infrastructure bill and being supported heavily by private sector partners, many of whom you see on this stage who are very involved in this space. We believe that this digital layer is the future operating system for the future of mobility. It is the next generation of our ITS network, in fact. So I'm going to introduce the panel very briefly. So let's see, starting from the end here, we have Firas, Ibrahim, Director of Research and Development and Technology Office at USDOT. Next to him, we have Sanjay Ravi, who is General Manager, Automotive, Mobility, and Transportation Industry at Microsoft. Then we have Dimitris, Bountolos, Chief Information and Innovation Officer at Ferrovial. We have Samir Sharma, General Manager, Cities and Transportation at Intel. And then next to me we have Sanjay Ravi, General Manager, sorry.
Our names are like the Rubik's Cube.
I know, I'd like to be Sanjay. Okay, Sanjay Sharma, Professor of Mechanical Engineering at MIT. My apologies. So the first question I want to focus on is, as we've talked about, we have growing challenges in our transportation system. We have legacy physical infrastructure that does not meet current demand. We have increasing climate impacts in our system. We have fatalities on roadways at an all-time high. We all know technology can provide powerful tools to combat these challenges. But what are some of the specific outcomes? Getting back to people, what are some of the specific outcomes that you see enabled by investments in digital infrastructure? In short, what is the why for all the investments that you're making? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with Dimitris. And we're going to keep comments brief so we can get to a couple of questions.
Thank you, Laura, and the audience for the opportunity to elaborate in that. Is a hard topic for us. So the why is a quite complicated Rubik cube. Because for us, the why is attached to the physical infrastructure that we build and to to the operational inefficiencies that we need to tackle along the years. Accidents, death, severe or not, friction during the daily interaction, fluidity of the lines, thinking in the future, and what is more important, having a long perspective, coexistence of autonomous and not autonomous cars in a long-term path. For us, it's a dilemma that has to be solved with a systematic structure. We are seeing that many of those challenges have a common playground where the technology could act as a catalyzer, and where consistent agreements across all those domains could represent an early stage solution. But fluidity, congestion, that is impacting in sustainability, death, a more seamless and frictionless interaction where the driver or future user of those autonomous cars will be able to feel safer in the environment. That's for us the core of our mission and what we are driving for.
Let's go next to Samir. Do you want to?
Oh, on the same topic.
Yeah, sorry, same topic. Can you just? I would love for everyone to talk about a couple of outcomes that you see from your investments and from what you're doing in digital infrastructure. Why it matters to everyone in this room and people out using our transportation system today.
I think our introductory speakers set it up very well when they talked about the big pillars, right? It's about safety, it's about economic outcomes, and it's about equity. But it's not sufficient to just speak those words. I think there's a desire and need to go deeper. So let's talk about safety, right? Genoa talked about the number of traffic accidents. But then if you zoom in, what you realize is these 41,000 fatalities, about 20% of those are happening at intersections. 50% of the accidents are happening at intersections. 40% of those are, extreme accidents. And intuitively it makes sense. That's where a lot of pedestrians, cars moving in different directions intersect. So then the question becomes, where do you focus? And so I think we have to translate the intent of what we're trying to do to how we do it and what outcomes we're looking for. Another example is economic output. Historically, this number has been thrown around that every dollar you invest in infrastructure results in $3 of GDP creation. I think that model is completely outdated. I think we need to look at new infrastructure, not just as physical infrastructure, so we need to go beyond cement and steel and think about bits and bytes as well. And when we do that and we model the impact, I think you'll see a much higher multiple in terms of GDP impact and uplift. And the third thing is sustainability. We talk about the carbon footprint. We think about how the current, all the goods and services and people being moved around, what kind of carbon footprint that's creating. I think having real-time analytics can help us figure out how do you minimize that carbon footprint. I mean, we could talk about this topic for an hour, but that's why I think we need to go from this higher level pillar to, measuring what matters, because what we measure also matters because it drives behaviors, incentives, and how we go about it.
Okay, Sanjay, Ravi.
Actually, I'm going to follow Samir, pretty much the same set of pillars. One thing we're all coming together, and you were talking about end outcomes. At Microsoft, we talk about this from the same similar pillars, maybe called slightly differently. It's all about safety, sustainability, and we call it as productivity. So when we look at safety, there are multiple aspects of safety. The first one is these vehicles, being it autonomous or assisted drive vehicles, helping augment the capabilities of people. So it's a much more safer operating environment. But there's also another aspect of safety. How do you make sure people who are in the car are not distracted? And in fact, some of the accidents are going up nowadays because people are all on the cell phones. And how do you support with what they want to do, getting on a conference call or responding to a text without getting distracted? So the whole industry needs to focus on safety even before we get into fully autonomous drive. And the last one is cybersecurity. I think there's a lot of nation actors that are, we all need to be prepared for from an infrastructure standpoint. So cyber plays a huge role around safety. Then you get into the second phase around sustainability. I think that Samir and team talked about it. We truly believe measuring emissions is still critical. Everybody talks about net zero objectives. People are still struggling in terms of their impact, how to measure it across scope 1, 2, and 3. So the industry needs to come together. There's a lot of great work going on in that space. And the last one is productivity. So going back to the conversation from John, how do you make this environment of transportation fun and enjoyable, but at the same time productive? So people, if they are sitting in a vehicle or in a public transport environment, how can they better use their time? So those are the three areas that we believe there's an opportunity. And the last one, the infrastructure and the digital infrastructure plays a big role to make sure that seamless connectivity and experience is there. I love the Autobahn. I go there all the time. But even today, if you're on a conference call, it drops off 2 or 3 times in a stretch of 100 miles. So we have a lot of work to do to support the digital infrastructure.
Okay, Sanjay, Sharma.
Thank you. Look, maybe I'll take a slightly different track, although I completely agree with everything everyone said, which is, you pay for intelligence today. Your smartphone you pay for it because it has a computer camera, machine learning that does speech recognition, and the money chases the intelligence. We have an asymmetry right now, which is that, just to put it bluntly, the cars are getting really smart and we pay for them. I pay Elon Musk a lot of money, frankly, on my Tesla, on a subscription basis. But the roads are quite dumb, actually. And that asymmetry is unfair, and it's also unsafe. If you could make the road smarter, you could actually lower the cost of cars and make it safer for everyone. That's point number one. Point number two is, I think we're also we talk about, level 1, level 2 in autonomy. We should also talk about infrastructure. Right now, we're in collective data collection and collective action. So you can see that there's a lot of traffic, and you can sign it saying, there's a lot of traffic. The next stage is when you get to individuated data collection and individuated action, which is a traffic light saying you can go because this car can go. Smart infrastructure where you're talking to individual cars. And I think these are both sort of directions we need to go in, but the net has to be exactly what my colleagues talked about and what Jinhua and our provost talked about.
So food for thought on that, right before I go to Firas, at an event recently, we were talking about this, and to the comment of why are there no deaths in aviation, but so many in road transportation, ground transportation, and a comment was made, airplanes are some of the most advanced vehicles out there with automation, but if you notice, they don't fly without ground control, right? So this digital infrastructure layer is the ground control for this future mobility system, and that is exactly what we're talking about, is how do we get a smart, connected infrastructure system to enable all of these future mobility advancements for us.
Yeah, thank you. So at DOT, when we started about 50 or more years ago, actually the Department of Transportation around my age, Congress told us that we need to move people efficiently, effectively, and goods for the people. Thank you. Now while we're doing that, while we're doing that, I want to make sure that there are no deaths, no fatalities or serious injuries. I want to make sure that we're friendly to the environment, and we want to make sure we allow access to everybody to actually access the system. And of course, we all realize that transportation is the backbone to the economy. Now, the new DOT rules center around safety, economic development or growth, about equity, about climate and sustainability, but most importantly, now about transformation. And the Department of Transportation realized that we're really at the hinge of history right now. We have a tremendous opportunity between all the new and emerging technologies, but also the funding that you all saw like over the last year, $1.2 trillion for infrastructure. So if we all work together and do it right, we have a tremendous opportunity to capture these new and emerging technologies, upgrade the infrastructure, add layers to it, the digital, the service operation, and allowing for ABS and non-ABS actors in the system all to work together so we can improve the efficiency of the system. Personally, I think technology is really cool. I mean, how many of us probably, I remember when I wrote my PhD dissertation, it was let's try again. I typed my PhD dissertation on a typewriter. It was very frustrating. Every time I made a mistake, I didn't know how to operate a typewriter to start with. And then you saw the IBM typewriter, the electronic typewriters, and now we have computers. It's so easy just to delete and type again. And how many of us today use our phones from speech-to-text recognition to make our life easier? So personally, I think on the transportation side, not only digital infrastructure makes transportation convenient, but it's really cool for the American people. Back to you.
So you segued nicely into the next conversation, and I want this to be more of a conversation between everyone. But you talked about we have this opportunity right now to make these investments, which we absolutely do. And technology is eligible under the various programs in the bipartisan infrastructure law. In fact, more technology than ever before is eligible. But it's only eligible. So that means that all of our public agencies who are making determinations about where to invest have to decide that they're going to invest in technology. It's no surprise to anyone in this room that for public agencies, investing in technology is a risk. And public agencies are not always the best at taking risk. So my question for the panel is two-part. First is, how do we actually articulate the return on investment for investing in these technologies to make the case for more public agencies to take that leap and to develop the partnerships needed with the private sector to do so? And then secondly, what is that business model? Because there's a lot involved when you deploy technology. Even if you can make the decision to do it, then you have to operate and maintain it. And so what is the business model for this future system? And there may be more than one. So I'd like to hear thoughts from folks on those two questions. So whoever, I can call on someone, or someone can go first.
Maybe I'll just sort of kick things off by saying that while we grapple with the problems of automation and infrastructure in vehicles, there is another sort of elephant in the room, which is 5G. And 5G, in my view, and this may be controversial, and I'm trying to be controversial especially, is a wonderful technology that's still looking for the killer use case, because there's only so much bandwidth that we all consume, and it makes a big bet on edge computing and phased array radar type transmitters and so on. And I think that there is a real opportunity for 5G rollouts and automotive and intersections and highways to come together. What it is, I haven't figured out yet. And I'm good at predicting this and failing to make any money out of it. But I'll just put it out there, and I hope I've bought my colleagues a little bit of time to answer that question.
I'm going to build on that specific question and sort of the challenge that Sanjay threw out about, hey, we talk about this 5G as a bit of a buzzword. What is it doing for us? Just in terms of my background, I've seen the transition from 2G to 3G to 4G and now 5G. And what's very different about how in the network world we talk about 5G is that it's not focused on your smartphone anymore. Yes, smartphone will become better, but it's the first time where with the entire reference design, the standard was derived to connect Internet of Things. It's a completely fundamentally different approach to how the network design was done. There are two examples that I'm happy to share where I think these kind of things are starting to come together. So in December of last year, together with 5G AA and 8 private sector companies, as well as the city of Turin in Italy, for the first time we demonstrated multi-telco, multi-car vendor interoperability between alerts on your phone, alerts on the car, and the infrastructure understanding what's happening on a smart intersection. We then replicated that trial in Blacksburg, Virginia in March of this year. The intent behind these is to take stuff out of the lab and ideas out of the lab and deploy them in real life and say, what have we learned? And then create blueprint and quickly scale it up. So I thought I'll just defend the 5G a little bit in terms of its applicability.
Tell me, you call it the Turing machine?
Yeah. I think it was the opportunity, the creative opportunity there.
Just hammering on top, we're fully aware about the dilemma about 5G and the opportunities at the same time. And to deploy in a reliable way, consistently along the highways, a dense 5G network would require a completely different approach. What we have started is considering that the physical asset is not anymore a physical asset, it's a digital asset. And exploring which is the best scenario in order to allocate and to introduce that technology to be resilient. Coming to your question, Laura, there are many alternatives. But first of all, we need to start trying to consistently guarantee that those initiatives are eligible for financing. On top of that, obviously that the private sector is able to influence taking more risk, assuming many of the challenges that we have been doing in the last decades. When we introduced 30 years ago the first highway without barriers, thanks to the radio frequency, we were pioneers trying to introduce that mainstream, and right now it's a commodity successful history. What we are doing is trying to base in a common bedrock, safety, sustainability, risk that could be represented by the social equity, try to enable P3 type of schemes where the financing support by the institution would enable the possibility to showcase signature project that could scale and create the needed trust in the OEM industry and in many of the shared costs. That's what we are doing, for example, in Virginia with the I-66, move from the lab to the real ground, have a dedicated corridor, and try to put in common all those technologies. Financing issues, or how to transfer to the social environment the ROI that all are expected, will require eligibility, in our desirability, P3, availability type of schemes, and I think there are formulas if we are all in the same mood and alignment.
And you're taking the risk off of the public agency because you're taking all that maintenance and operation, installation, everything.
That's part of our role, and
Yep.
what we have been doing for decades.
Maybe I'll also add a couple of things, Laura, to your question in terms of what is the output that we're looking to drive here, the end value. So a couple of things come to mind. One is today it's still very difficult to get all the data and information in terms of the experience an end user or a traveler is having, and then how do you improve that? And the technologies have evolved pretty substantially in that space, and there's a huge opportunity for cities across the world to leverage that. One example that comes to mind is the work that the city of San Francisco municipality is doing, where they're getting data today from all types of transport, like it could be rail, it could be taxis, scooters. The data exists, but in the old ways, pulling all that together and then getting sense out of that was a huge issue. And today, with advances in computing, both on the cloud and the edge, you can get insights very easily. That still requires a lot of work. So now they can start measuring, when they start doing changes, how is it actually going to impact the end user? So that's one piece of outcome that I believe technology is already allowing people, and there's an opportunity to expand that further. The second piece I would say is, in terms of de-risking, we totally believe gone are the days that you sign up with one technology provider that gives you end-to-end solutions that includes hardware, software, all integrated, and you need to work with them to support your needs for the short and medium term. So we're getting into the world of everything being software defined. It could be your car, it could be your infrastructure. People have to decouple hardware and software. So you have the optionality when you start out with certain things are not working out, you can change vendors. You can innovate in open communities and open source environments. So that's a huge, huge driver to reducing the risk. So folks can continue to innovate without being boxed into decisions they make at one point in time.
Okay, before I go to the business case, I'm just going to make a quick comment on the 5G and the challenges of 5G. Interestingly, looking at other industries and other sectors, we're really having a lot of conversations today within the walls of the, outside the wall on 5G. But if you look at the Department of Defense, they're talking about 10G, just trying to help you closer, 10G and beyond. So they're talking about 10G. You were brave enough to start talking about 6G at the Department, or into transportation sector. So going back to the business case, for DOT, I mentioned that we're in the business of moving people and goods for the people, but we want to make sure there are no fatalities and serious injuries. And you heard the number, more than 40,000, surprisingly after COVID, that went up. we believe that safety is really a great compelling case to actually make the case for investment in digital infrastructure. So nobody can argue with that. And I know there's plenty of cases out there, pilots that demonstrate all of that. I know our office, ITSJPO, is going to put the Resource Center website to demonstrate, the many pilots that were ready really for a large-scale deployment. But I would also add, as you're talking, like you mentioned, Laura, investments are not made by the federal, decisions are not made by the federal government, but rather by the states and local governments. So for them to, and all the public sector in general, doesn't matter where they sit, they're really in a very tough spot because they have limited resources. Although we have $1.2 trillion, there's still decisions that need to be made as to where the money goes. So that's why in the past we went to an asset management approach to try to figure out where investments need to be made, whether we need to invest in new infrastructure or maintaining infrastructure before they deteriorate faster. I think what's probably is an opportunity in there to ask the question to say, as we're doing a longer term planning, if infrastructure lasts 50, 75, or 100 years, are we ready for the technology that's available today? And what's the technology that's going to be available 10, 20, 30 years from now? How do we build that into our longer term planning? I think we need to have that crucial conversation with decision makers, so at least they start thinking about that. I think you can make the case, for example, when you put value on life, when you put value on the efficiency of the system, you can see the analysis make a great, clear business case for investment in digital infrastructure.
Yeah, and we're talking on the macro level, but I want to point out a couple examples on an individual city or state level that we have found within our membership, our public agencies, they have been impactful for making the case to others. So New York City has about $1 billion in IT assets. They realized they could use all the data they were getting off those assets. So this digital infrastructure layer, this piece of it they've already built, it allowed them to be able to convert a lane on the Brooklyn Bridge to a protected bike and cycling lane without impacting car traffic in and out of the Brooklyn Bridge. It's a great example. Everyone in this room understands the Brooklyn Bridge, the traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge, the use case there. If they did not have access to that data, that digital infrastructure providing that data and that information, they would not have felt comfortable making that decision. But they were able to do it. Cycling went up 80%, and it has been a great way to manage the resources. This also goes to, so cities and states are seeing they can actually get more out of their existing physical infrastructure when they do have a digital infrastructure layer that provides the information. To your point, Sanjay, it's the information, not just the data, but how do you turn it into usable information. In Las Vegas, they've been using an AI-based and predictive analytics mobility platform that has allowed them to predict where crashes may happen, work with the police to pre-station emergency vehicles. They have reduced speeding, they've improved safety, reduced crashes, and because they're using this digital infrastructure, the emergency responders are being alerted about 9 minutes faster. So they're saving lives, right, even on the post-crash care. And then, when you talk about sustainability, we can talk about mode shift. This information is being used by cities, transit agencies, states to determine how am I going to provide better service to incentivize people maybe to take transit, to mode shift, providing on-demand mobility. There's a host of examples that showcase how these investments can really help you do more with less, I will say, for a public agency, but we need to all do a better job making that case. Because at the end of the day, those agencies are having to make very hard decisions and prioritize investments, and we need to make the case of why the investment in technology is the smart investment for the future. So I want to go to this next question. I think we have about 2 minutes. So at the national level, we've been talking with our partners at USDOT, with the private industry, with some public sector agencies, with telecoms, and a whole host of folks about this growing need for a national reference architecture for digital infrastructure. How do we move forward to ensure that we have interoperability, we heard that word, that we have a standardized approach, understanding this is a massive undertaking, and we need to have probably a phased approach. Question to the group is, do we need a national reference architecture? And if we do, what's the best way to do that? Is it a top-down approach coming from the federal government? Is it a bottoms-up approach? So question to the group.
I'll try and address that. I like Sanjay's point that this work is too important and too complex for even certainly one company, or even 2 or 3 companies to do together. But I think you are seeing some collaboration happen in the ecosystem where the principles of interoperability. And what does interoperability mean? Right? Think about Lego. I mean, if you have kids who love building Lego blocks together, you can take a Lego block from the 1970s and mix it with a Lego block from today, because the interfaces have been clearly defined and they just fit together. I'm not saying that we put out a 50-year-old resilient architecture, but we need to think in those terms. In other words, we can all build different houses, but the windows and the doors need to be similar in terms of how the data exchange happens. So that's one principle of how this reference architecture needs to be designed. If we say there's got to be one reference architecture, I think you see a lot of players in the ecosystem get a bit defensive and say, hey, are you boxing me in? That's not what we're trying to do here, or what we're suggesting. The idea is to have clear guidelines that allow for that multi-vendor option and a thriving ecosystem that's collaborating but also competing with each other. I think the second thing we need to look at is what's happening in the rest of the world. I do feel, my business is global, so I spend a lot of time outside the US. In a lot of the US-oriented meetings, we tend to be a bit insular. I think we have to open up a little bit to what's happening in the rest of the world that's working really well. Now, not everything in a different form of government will translate into how we implement it in the US, but there are some key learnings we can acquire from there. And how does compute, connectivity come together? What is the role of AI? What is the role of sensing? You can design principles around that. And I think the federal government and the state governments and public agencies have a huge role to play in forwarding this, because the idea is not to legislate and control. The idea is to guide and encourage. That's got to be the principle behind these architectures.
Fully aligned, just to have on top of what Samir has said, general guidelines that will define the boundary condition of how to tackle what problem, I think, are essential. But if we wait under the entire framework is defined, we're going to lose a tremendous opportunity. And that's also a part of the dilemma. So we are betting for probably working, running later on, using showcases, project where with the minimum guidelines we will be able to build the boundary condition of those building blocks. I typically share with my team. Drivers today are like human APIs. They are interacting with all the mechanisms around the car. We will be able to define the standard mechanisms of interaction from the physical infrastructure to the rest of the ecosystem, just identifying the way to communicate with those physical API. That could be the starting point in order to progressively adapt to the new technology, introduce new mechanisms of computation, because there is not the problem. It's the way we are going to consume that value from data. So in a lot of years, the dilemma with 2 different streams of philosophical stream, cars will have to be as autonomous as possible, that they don't need to digest information. We were cutting the possibility to interact with different building blocks. Right now, what we are saying is, instead of consuming from another source the status of the traffic lights, why are we not going to rely in technology that could give you that information in order to amplify the situational awareness? Those building blocks are technically the same that many of the cars are using today. It's just the generator of the information, which is a new actor.
So if I may add to that, so the reference architecture, fantastic idea, and I like what Firas mentioned about looking at certain problem spaces to start with when you call what run phase, and safety is a fantastic place to start, because clarifying some of that helps us move faster. So that's one. The second one, there is a lot of no regret moves the industry can make, and for me, when I look at across mobility, automotive, There's already some great work going on in terms of interoperability. Like something that comes to mind is the work the Eclipse Foundation is doing around software-defined vehicles, different space. But what they're doing there is they're bringing innovation from different players, and then there is a ton of non-differentiating heavy lifting that's required that everyone does not have to do. So you're having folks coming in, competitors, sharing some of those technologies into open source environments so that folks can focus on where they want to differentiate and drive value. So going back to Sanjay's earlier point, the smartness and the intelligence within the infrastructure is way, way behind what is already available with many products today. And one way to accelerate that is get that ecosystem to innovate together. And efforts like the software-defined vehicle working group we have within Eclipse is a fantastic way by which you can start moving very, very quickly.
Ross, I'd love your comments on this.
Okay. That's a great question, system architecture. And if I were to ask the audience, what do we mean by system? Is it transit? Is it surface? Is it highways, bridges? Is it maritime? And I would say, or is it aviation? Because I heard Cindy talked about her aviation work. I would say we should really look at the system of transportation as a global system, first of all, national system that's connected globally. So everything from surface, soft surface, hard surface, all the way up to space. Now we're talking about space travel as well. And as the technology evolves, and apparently NASA is ahead of FAA, FAA is ahead of us at the surface, and we have different things that may not necessarily operate between each other, sharing information, there's not the right protocol. So from the Department of Transportation perspective, we have the vision now, and we're about to release the new USDOT, the DOT strategic plan. And under the goal of transformation that I mentioned earlier is basically there are two research priorities, and one of them is the integrated system, the system that we want to develop fully. And under that, there are objectives to make sure that the system is integrated, interoperable, that digital infrastructure, we have concepts of operation, and of course for the system that we have a system architecture, but also connectivity and using the networks as well. And all of it is with a focus on people, because we want a great user experience, because all of us are user of transportation, right? We don't think about the FAA and federal highways and the FDA. We just want to get from home to where we want to go. And we don't think about the jurisdictions we go to. So we want our life to be as easily as possible. So today I'm going to leave a bunch here, go back home. I can push a button on my computer and I can get an Uber pick me up, right? So it's a nice thing. So but we need to think about it in a bigger sense. It's a very complicated thing. It's not an easy thing to solve over a day. I would say there are plenty of technologies that are ready to deploy today at scale. But the challenge with new and emerging technology, the evolution of technology, as you look at it, from the 2 wheels back in the Roman days, thousands of years ago, to 4 wheels with a horse, to the combustion engine, to now we're talking about electric cars and automated vehicles. And yes, there's also the flying cars, or is it a rotable automobile? Flying car. Is it the rotable automobile? No, flying. I forgot. But it's interesting. Like, so, and then the question becomes, who has the jurisdiction over regulating all of this? And luckily with the DOT, we have the Net Council now with some law that helps on the issue. So from our side, we're investing resources and research. We're going to be available. I like the comment on federal government role in terms of guidance and really great at providing guidance and technical assistance if technology has value to the American people. But nonetheless, I think we need to both work from the top down, and top doesn't mean the federal government. There's role for the legislators as well, right? For the funding, is it a dedicated funding source? Or what are the swim lanes for the different modes? Do we have those boundaries that are black and white, or are they really dissolving and now they all need to work together? There's a lot of challenges, but that takes time, right, to do all of that. Now, Congress is going in the direction we're realizing the multimodal system is system where they're given the DOT, at the DOT level, the charge of multimodalism. They established a new position, for example, in the Secretary's office to be the Assistant Secretary for Multimodal Freight. They established a SMART program to make sure those deployment efforts of technologies that are available today to city and local governments and states, that there's funding to to give an incentive for all this. So the opportunities are tremendous, and I think though we have to all work together because it doesn't matter where you sit, if it's MIT or nonprofit or state, local, federal government or any university, but the private sector. We all need to work together, and I know there's an effort bringing ASH to ITS, all the coalitions, and I commend you for all this effort, but we really need to have everybody at that innovation table to get to where we need to. But yes, we do need the system architecture, but it's going to take a while. I would say we started talking about it right now, but to do it right, it's going to take us a while to get there.
So we are at time, but I want to very briefly just tease out in 10 seconds or less what you view as the biggest challenge to investment in digital infrastructure. And for us, you can still answer, although I did hear governance. Governance of transportation is a challenge, but we can just go down the line.
I think that we've all got to sort of, an investment in this means we all hold hands and jump off at the same time. And no one's going to jump off until everyone knows that there is a single sort of investment that will work. And that's holding us back.
I think the most critical thing holding us back is we are bringing ecosystems where people have lived with a certain way of thinking and understanding of what infrastructure means. And we need to learn each other's language, because until we do that, I think we'll be talking past each other. There's a role for public sector, there's a role for private sector in making that communication happen before we go and actually use it.
Probably as any investment gaining scale, you will consolidate and make proof. Interoperability is mandatory in order to guarantee that scale. So top-down, clear policies that will let the private sector to scale are mandatory.
I would just say, I'll just turn it around and say the opportunity is open innovation, which is also a challenge today, and it comes down to a lot of things we've talked today.
I would say the challenges is, going back to the first question, I think, or second question, is there's a lot of money out there, but also our infrastructure is deteriorating. We need to bring it back to a good state. I'm talking about the physical infrastructure. To give it another upgrade, that's going to cost money. So there really needs to be a good effort in terms of asset management to make decisions on these investments. But also, even to get rid of like old traffic signals and lights and upgrade them for new functions that may be changing over time, that's going to be another challenge. But most importantly, all of us here have different level of expertise in the tech, in the planning and engineering and whatever sector or part you come in. I think there's a skill gap in the transportation community to make sure they all understand what digital infrastructure is, what technology is. So for example, if you're going to have transportation planners plan for transportation, and they don't understand any of this, they don't even know what questions to ask. So I think there needs to be an increased effort in terms of education that we need to work as corners for the private, the nonprofit, the federal government, and state and local government to bring everybody up to speed if you want to see progress.
I second all of those comments, and I want to thank our panel very much, and I think we're continuing the conversation at the tables, John, but thank you all very much for that.
Thank you so much.